Hello, good evening, everyone. Myself, Professor Sanjay Jaiswar from AG School of Data Science, and I welcome you all for this master session on designing database for your projects. So, what exactly we are going to cover in this master class is to understand what is the importance of database while you're working on a project, and while working on the project, you may have heard about the term front end and back end. So today we are going to focus mainly on our back end development, that is on database. So to begin with, let's start with a small presentation about a brief introduction to what is exactly backend, what is DBMS, what is database, and for that I will share a slide with you. So let's begin. Okay, so now what is project backend? And for this we have to understand the concept of backend with an example. So while working on a project, most of the times you have heard these two very common terms, that is front end and back end. So we are not going to focus too much on the front end. That is, when we talk about the front end, is basically designing. That is a web application or web designing part. That is basically concerned with your view. Neither we are going to discuss too much about the programming when we are talking about the backend development. So in backend development, we have two important things. One is programming, and second is your working on databases. So we are not going to discuss too much about your programming also, but our main focus would be to work on our database. So database is very important when we start with our backend. So let's begin with the definition of what exactly do you mean by the backend. And for that, you need to understand what is a dynamic website. So there are different types of web applications or website. One is your static and one is your dynamic. Now, when we talk about the static website, in static website, we don't have, usually we don't have any database in the backend. Usually we have the front end, that is only the static web pages. But when we talk about the dynamic website or any web application, then we talk about our database and backend. So many websites are dynamic in nature. In dynamic website, the content keeps on updating time to time. Unlike your static websites, a dynamic website will have some pages where you will see the data keeps on updating. Okay, whenever you visit the website, every time you will see the data is updated. There might be some images, there might be some there might be some content which keeps on updating. So where this data comes from, where this information comes from, so obviously it has to be saved or stored somewhere. So there comes your database. So in the backend, you will have some memory allocation for your data, and this data will be saved in your memory in a very structured format. Okay, and for that we use a special software. Okay, so that software is nothing but your DBMS software. So all the data which is saved in the backend in your server or in your memory will be managed by this software, and all the data which is shown in the front end, that is updated on the front end, comes from this backend database. So let's try to understand what is database and what is DBMS. So DBMS is nothing but a collection of data. Now data can be structured or unstructured. So what is a structured data? And before that, what is a database? So database is a collection of data. Now data can be structured. Now what kind of structured data you know? All the data which is saved in the form of a proper schema, like your tables. A table will have rows and columns. So table is a schema. So the data can be saved in the form of rows and columns in tables. Okay, for example, the very famous DBMS software MySQL. So MySQL manages all the database in a schema called as table, and it consists of rows and columns. So all the structured data will be saved in your table schema. There is another type of DBMS software which is not similar to your MySQL. It is your MongoDB. If you know MongoDB, it saves the data in the form of collection. So it doesn't have the table. The concept of table is not there. We have the collection. And what is collection? It is like a document in which you have a JSON-like object where every record which is saved in that document, it is in the form of a JSON object, but or the structure of that object is in a JSON format, where every object will have collection of key value pair. So here every record is an object. So the data is saved in a structured format in your table schema in MySQL, and in the form of collections or document in your DBMS software like your MongoDB. Then we have some unstructured data. Basically, unstructured data is a collection of data like images, documents, audio, video files, and a lot of other data which doesn't have a proper structure. So this data is also, you may have the collection of these data as well in your server. So these are called as your unstructured data. Okay, so there are two different types of data, as I told you, structured data and unstructured data. Now, what is a DBMS? As I told you, DBMS is a software that manages these databases. So in your server, there will be a special software called as DBMS software. As I have given you two examples. One is your MySQL DBMS software, and one is your MongoDBMS software. We're not going to talk too much about your MongoDBMS. We are going to talk about MySQL DBMS right now. So MySQL is an example of a software which manages all the structured data. Okay, and unstructured data, basically software like your MySQL or MongoDB will not manage the unstructured data, but yes, reference to that unstructured data, that is the path to that unstructured data, would be managed by your DBMS software. Okay, so in short, what does the DBMS software does? So all the important tasks like data definition, right from the creation of the data structure, then data manipulation. What is data manipulation? Once your structure is ready, you start inserting your data. So it is like creating a building before living into the building. So we have to first create the building, that is to define the structure of the data. So it is like creating tables. Then data manipulation is your insert, delete, and update. So insert and delete update is like performing the operations on data, like when you want to whenever you want to save any data in your table. So we will have insert query, then we have our update query, and then we have our delete query. So inserting the data, updating the data, and deleting comes under data manipulation. So this function is also performed by your DBMS software. Then we have data query. So when we have huge amount of data in different tables, so we can simply fetch the data from the table using data query. Okay, select queries. And then we have your another important category of another function called as data control or data security. Basically, it is you can say it is an access control to the database, or providing security to the database, like your which user, or you're creating multiple users and then granting the permission and privileges on your database. That all comes under your control language. So these are the four important features that are provided by any DBMS software. So we're not going to go much deeper into our theory part, because we are going to practically create one database, and for that we are going to take an example. So here what we are going to do, here we are going to create one database, and in our master class, basically our focus would be to demonstrate one complete database for one simple project. So for that purpose, I am going to create one database that will be for online examination system, and it would be and I will be using MySQL DBMS software. And the software which I'm going to use for MySQL is your Workbench. So Workbench is a UI, or is a user interface or IDE to manage all the database while we are working with your MySQL DBMS software. So for that you have to install this software. Again, I'm not going to show you the installation part. You have to simply search for the software called as your MySQL Workbench. You will get all the instructions how to download and install your MySQL Workbench for MySQL. And then once you have installed, I will show you where the installation, where the MySQL database path is saved, and how to set the path for your MySQL while we are working with your console. Now there are two ways we can work on your MySQL workbench, but right now I'm going to focus on console, because as a beginner you should always try to work on the console base or your MySQL console. So that will give you a better understanding about how the SQL query works. So I will be demonstrating everything on the console. So now in this particular project, that is online examination system, we will be having, this project will be having three panels. Whenever you create any application, you will have different dashboard or different login panels. So here in online examination system, as the project says, it would be a system that will be created to conduct an online examination. So there will be three different logins. First will be a faculty login, that is a faculty panel. Second would be your admin panel, and third would be a student panel. Now, as in faculty panel, faculty would be able to create the subject, then create topics, then in the topics it create subjects, then under that it can create chapters, under that it can create topic, and then it can create the questions for those topics. And these questions would be MCQ based. Right now we are focusing on MCQ questions. So the faculty would be doing all this task. Second would be admin panel, where admin would be able to create an exam, a test. Then he would be able to assign the subject and questions to he would be able to assign the questions for those tests. And finally there will be a third panel, that is student panel, wherein student can be would be able to enroll for the test. Okay, and then finally he will be able to give the exam. So we have three different panels. So if you see the system, it seems to be a little complicated or bigger project, but it is, if I show you the database, it is hardly a matter of say 8 to 9 tables. So if you have a proper database structure, so creating a project or understanding about the workflow of a project becomes very easy. So let's begin. The first, how we are going to what kind of tables that you are going to create, because now we are going to create our database. So for database we need tables. So here for the first set of user, that is the user, if the user is a faculty, so we will have a table called as user, but the role will be different. So first role is that the user is the faculty. So what does the user is going to do? User is going to create the subjects, that is the faculty. Faculty is going to create the subject. Then after creating the subject, he will be able to create the chapters, and in this chapters he is going to create the topics, and then he is going to add the questions under each topics. So these are the sequence of the tasks that a user as a faculty who can do all the operations on your what this would be that task assigned to the faculty. Now second user is your admin user. So the role is admin now here. So there will be a role called as admin. The user would be admin. He would be creating a test. Then he will set the pattern for the test. When I say test, so a test might be consist of one single subject, or it might be of multiple subjects. And then in that also multiple subjects also, he might be able to select multiple topics and multiple chapters, and from that chapter the question might be pulled. So we have a test will be have some pattern, and then from that he will be pulling all the questions. So a test will be created, and finally after the test is created, the third user would be student. The student, now the role is student, and the user as a student will enroll to that test, and finally he will give the exam. So by giving exam means nothing but simply selecting the answer for the particular question. So if you see here, we have three tables. Basically user is a common table, and one more table roles. So here we have two tables. Here we have three tables. I'm not counting the user table. So that's 5, and here again 4. So 9, 10 and 11 tables. So with the help of 11 tables, you can simply create an online examination system. So let's try to start with our practical now. And again, I told you, for this, I am going to use MySQL Workbench. So first of all, I will show how your MySQL Workbench looks, but I'm not going to use Workbench GUI for creating the database, but I'm going to do everything on the console. But for your just for your knowledge, I'm showing you the software which is installed in my system. So here I'm going to simply search for Workbench. Now Workbench is a GUI for your MySQL database. So you have to simply install this, and then as you can see now on your screen, we have our MySQL Workbench. Now while installing the MySQL Workbench, it by default the user is root. So the main super user, you can say, the first user is your root user, and whenever you install your MySQL Workbench, it will always ask for a password, and the password during installation I have set again as root only. So when I click here, so it will ask for the password, it is root. So I am simply entering the root, and I will click, and you will see that your GUI interface for your Workbench appears. So now this is the GUI for working with databases, creating database, and doing all the tasks which is required for working on your MySQL database. But as a beginner, I will always recommend to avoid the GUI. Always try to work on your console. That will make you a good programmer. So let's begin with our console now. So for that, what we are going to do, first of all, I will explain you how I have set the path for MySQL, because we are working on the console. So for that, what we have to do, we have to simply go to our C drive. In the C drive, we have to go to the my program files, and in this program file, whenever you have installed your MySQL Workbench, before that you have to install MySQL. So you will have this folder called as MySQL. In this MySQL, you will have this MySQL server, and in this MySQL server you will have this bin path. So you have to simply copy this path. Okay, copy this, and then go to your computer, again my computers, go to the properties, and then go to the advanced systems. Then in the environment variable, go to the path. If you don't have this path, you have to create a new path. Since I already have this path variable, so I will simply going to edit it and simply create this new and set the path. So we have set an environment variable, that is we have set the path. Now we can access the MySQL from our console from any folder. So this is how you have to set the path. So if you're not clear with this, once again after this master class, you can again review the video and follow the steps which I have demonstrated. For right now, what I'm going to do, I'm going to begin with our practical part right away. So for that, I'm going to use our console. So for that, I'm going to open my command prompt. And now, since I have set the environment variable, so what I have to do, I have to simply log into my MySQL database software, MySQL DBMS. So as in GUI, that is Workbench, what I did, I entered the password for the user root. I can simply type MySQL, then user root, and then the password. Now -u stands for user and -p stands for password. Now it will ask for the password. So I'm simply going to put root. Now, when I put the password correct, it will give me a MySQL command prompt. Now, I will just increase the font size for you. So now I am into my MySQL console. Now, to clear everything, we can use the shell command. And for that, what we are going to use, we are going to use \, and simply use CLS, or you can use clear. So here CLS, it will simply clear everything from the console. So please note down all these important commands. It will be helpful for you while you're working on your MySQL console. Now, the first thing that you have to do is you have to create your database. But before creating your database, let's check what are the databases which are already existing. So show databases. All these commands are very important. So show databases is a command and it will end with a semicolon. So every SQL commands end with a semicolon. So here we have list of our database which we have already created, but now we are going to create a very new database. And for that, what we are going to do, you are going to simply write create database, and the name of the database is your, say, my demo. So I'm just going to create a new database called as my demo. Now as I enter, it will show okay, that means my new database is created. Now again, to see my all the recently created database, again I have to use show databases, but you don't have to type every time. You can simply use up arrow key. When you use your up arrow key in your computer, you will be able to see the previous queries. So show databases, enter it, and you will see my demo is visible now. So here we are into my demo databases. Okay, so now what we have to do, we have to first select the database. So for that, we are going to use my demo. So my demo will simply take you into your database. It is my demo database. Otherwise, it will give an error, because before working on any database table, you have to select a proper database. So I have selected my database, my demo. Now, as our database is now selected, now what we are going to do, we are going to create our tables. Now to create our tables, again, as I told you, we have to create around 9 tables. And for that, what I'm going to do, I'm going to simply make use of an editor. Why I'm going to use this editor? Because I will write the query here so that it will be easier for you to read the query. And suppose if there is any error, you can simply make a change in this editor itself, and then copy the query from here, and you can simply paste on your console. Otherwise, if you write all the query on your console, and if there is any error, and obviously as a human being, you are bound to make any errors. So if you get any error, again, you have to type everything. So better you type everything on your notepad or any editor. So here right now I'm using this editor. Let's save this editor as your say mydemo.sql. And the editor which I am using is your Sublime text editor. Though it is nothing to do with your MySQL, but I'm just using it to write the queries so that I can copy the query from here and paste there. So the first table which I'm going to create is your roles. Create table roles. Okay, and in this I'm going to simply specify the different roles. So for that, I need a column called as ID. It will be an integer and it will be primary key. Okay, and it would be auto increment. Auto increment means it will simply increment my value to 1 automatically. So it will be auto increment, and then we'll have a role name, that would be varchar, that would be 100, and then finally we can have an index also. Now I will explain you what is index. So suppose if I want to make a role name as my index, I can simply use index role name. Now, what is the purpose of index? Suppose that now this is a table which is not going to contain too much records, but suppose if you have a table that has say millions of records. So index will help you to search the record easily if we on a particular column when you are searching the data. Because what does the index do? Whenever we create any index on any table on any particular column, index is created separately in your database, and that index arranges the record in ascending or descending orders, and then while searching it makes use of that index so that it will easily fetch the data from your actual table. So before fetching the data, searching the data from actual table, it will go and first search into the index table, and if it will find the reference for that record, and then it will come back to our table, and using that reference it will easily fetch the value. It is just like your index in your book. How you use your index in your book, before going to your before searching into the main pages, you first search the content in your index, take the page number and go directly to that page number. So it is exactly like that. So this is the concept of index. So first we will create a table called as roles. Now here we'll simply copy this and then simply paste here. Now When we paste here, you will see the OK. When we see the command, when we see the output OK, that means our table is created. You simply describe your table name, that is roles. So if you describe the roles, you will see the structure of your table. So here we have ID and then we have your roll number. So immediately we will insert two values in our roles table. So insert into roles. Let's have the values. The first value is admin. The first role is admin. Okay, and then let's have another value, second value. Now you can insert one record at a time. For example, if I want to insert only one value at a time, one record at a time, so I will be using insert into roles and then values. One is your ID and admin is your role name. So I can simply use this query. I can simply use this query and then simply run this. So here we will have, we are inserting one record at a time. But if I want to insert multiple records at a time, what can I do? I can simply write the query like this: insert into roles values. Now at this time I'm going to give 2. The second role is your student. Sorry, admin. Let's have faculty, and then third one. So I will be giving a comma, and then third would be your student. Okay. So now in a single query, what we are doing, we are inserting 2 values. So here you have 2 rows inserted. So here to check the data again, now we are going to make use of select query. Select all. Star means all. So asterisk represent all. So select all from roles. And now you will see 3 values are inserted in your roles table. So now we have a role table created. Now we have 3 different roles. Now we will create our next table, that is your users table. Okay. So now the next table will be users. So for that, create again table users. Without wasting too much time, let's create a table users, and in this user table now we will have again an ID. First column is always a primary key, so it will be ID integer primary key, and it will be auto increment, and then we will have our name. Okay, for before that, let's have a foreign key. Now what is a foreign key? So now we are going to understand a new concept of foreign key. Foreign key means what? Every user will be having any role. So if I have a user number 1, he will be either admin or faculty, or he will be a student. So for that I had to refer. So for that I had to refer a foreign table. So here I am going to write role ID. Now role ID is integer because it is a foreign key always refers to the primary key of another table. So here user table is going to refer the role table. Role table is your parent table, and ID is the primary key. So here the data type of primary key is integer. So here I have to specify role ID as integer only. Okay. Now here let's have our name column. So user will have some name. So let's have a varchar as say 100. Now next will be have our email for login. So let's have our email as 100. Then we have some important column called as contact. Let's have varchar contact at 10 digit. For now I am giving the contact as variable character only. Then email ID has to be unique, so I can simply specify with a attribute called as your unique. It is a constraint, it is a unique, so email would be unique. Okay, then we have contact. You can make the contact unique, or then we have our password field. Okay, password will be again a varchar, say I will say 20 character password maximum, and then after that we will have an important column called as active. It would be an active status, whether user is active or not. So let's have at 0 for inactive and 1 for active. Now we have following columns in our user tables, but the role ID is a foreign key, so we have to specify foreign key. Now foreign key is our role ID. So the column role ID is a foreign key, and it references the roles table, and in these roles it refers the primary key ID. So what does this statement means? Foreign key role ID is a foreign key. It references to the parent table roles, and in that it refers to the primary, that is ID. So now here we have our user table. So now let's create this user table again and enter it, and you will see our user table is created. I'm simply going to describe this table, and you will see the structure of the users table. ID is integer primary key. Role ID is MUL stand for it. It means that it is a uh, it is a foreign key table, and it is also an index. Sorry, the primary key is also by default an index. So I have not created any index on user like your roles table. I have not created any index, so I can create index separately. Suppose if I want to create an index, for example, like here I have created an index called as role name, but here I have not created any index. So you can create index here also. So for that, what you have to do, you have to simply write create index. Let's give the name of the index as user name index. Okay, so username index, and let's create this index on a users table, and in that I'm going to use the index for name. So here simply you are going to create an index. So if you have not created index in the table, you can separately create the index. So simply copy this and simply run here, and you will have your index created. Now if you want to check the index, how you are going to check the index? So you have to simply write show index from users. So as you select this, it will describe the index on user table. So it is showing you all the username index, and by default, as I told you, a foreign a unique key and a primary key, these are all your and your foreign keys. All your constraints become your by default index, and a newly added index is your username index. So these are all your index. So query for that is show index from users. So show index from roles. It will display all the index. So this was about your index. So now we have a table called as users. Now let's insert some values in the users. So insert into users. Now for this I'm going to use few of the values, that for example role ID. Some column which I'm going to use for inserting the value is role ID. Then we have name, then we have our email, then we have our contact, then we have our password, and then active status. So these are the columns which I'm going to use to insert the values, because ID is auto increment. So don't need to specify the ID. Then we have to specify the values. The values would be say role ID. So first is admin. Role ID is admin because I have inserted the first role as admin. So let's have an admin name as say myself, Sanjay, and then I will give the email ID. That is the third column. So name is Sanjay, then email ID is sanjay@aegis.com, and then I have the password field. Sorry, contact field. Let's have the contact. Okay, and then we have our password fields. I'm not focusing too much on this the character length and all those things. So we have our password. So now we have our first, and then status, active or not. So for that, what we are going to do, simply use one for active. So now here we have the first value. Okay, now similarly we can have multiple values. So let's have 3 users. So we'll have one more user, then comma one more user. So now the second would be your faculty. The second user is faculty. Say Amit is a faculty. Let's have our email ID as amit@aegis.com. Let's change some contact number. Let's have the password as it is, and then let it be active. Then we have the third role as student. Let's the student be Tushar, and then email ID be tushar@aegis.com. Let's change the contact a bit, and then password as it is, and it is also active. So now here we have 3 values. Okay, all the values are separated by the comma. So let's copy this and then simply paste here. Copy it properly and then paste here. And now you'll see all the three values are inserted. So select all from users, and you'll see all the values are now inserted. So you have ID here, you have roles, you have name, email, contact, password, and all the status are active. So now we have two tables, one your roles table and one you have your users table. Okay, similarly, now once we have created our users and roles, now the next thing is that we have to create this table called as subjects. So immediately, without wasting time, we'll create the table called subjects. So for that, now the next table is we are to go to create a table called as subject. To create table subjects, okay, let's have immediately only two columns: ID, integer, primary key, and auto increment. So we have our subject subject name. Okay, let it be varchar. Okay, so now we have our subjects. So now here we will create our table called as subjects. So we'll just simply copy this and then we'll paste here. So now here we have our table called as subject also. Okay, now inside the subject we will have our different chapters. So what we are going to do, we are going to simply create a table called as chapter. So create table chapters, and then inside this we will have ID, integer, primary key, and auto increment. Then we have chapter name, let it be varchar 100. Okay, and then to which subject this chapter belongs, so it will be subject ID here, it would be a foreign key. Okay, because this chapter belongs to one subject, I have to use the foreign key. So here I am going to use a foreign key. The foreign key is nothing but your a column that refers to the parent table. So here subject ID is your foreign key, it refers to subject tables. Okay, so as you can see here, subject, and in this it will refer to the primary table. So now here we will have one foreign key. I will simply copy this. Okay, you have to write the queries as it is. Suppose if you have any confusion, you can rewind these videos, and after it is hosted on YouTube, you can watch again and just try to this query, follow all this command and run on your console. So here now we have another table called as your chapters. So chapters is created, subject is also created. Now in this chapter we will have topics. So now again we will have create table chapters. After chapters we have topics. Okay, in the topic we have again ID, integer, primary key, auto increment, and then we have topic name, it will be varchar 100, and then we will have which chapter it does this topic belongs. So it will have a foreign key, and for that we will have chapter ID. The column name has to be very proper. You can select any column name, but it should be logically correct. So chapter ID, it will be integer and it will be a foreign key. So it will be your chapter ID. It refers to chapters table. Okay, and then inside it refers to your primary key. So now here we have our topics table. Now let's copy this and then simply run on our SQL command. So here we have our topics table. So now we have our chapters and topics completed. Now let's have our questions table, because inside the topic you will have our question table. So for that, what we are going to do, again we are going to create a table called as questions. So let's create table questions. Okay, now what does the questions will have? Again ID, every question will have a unique ID, integer, it will be a primary key, and auto increment. And then question description. Okay, question description, it will be a text. Now text is a data type used in MySQL for large text value. So it will be text description. Suppose that this question also has some image, so it can also have images, text images. question images, and it will be your varchar. We will have basically the path of the image. We will not save the image, but we will save the path of the image, because image is unstructured data. So we have to save the path of the image in the table. Then we have question image, and after that we will have to which topic does this question belong. So we will have topic ID, it will be integer, and then we will have a foreign key. Okay, that will be your topic ID. It will be references, it refers to topics, and then inside this it will refers to the primary key of the topic, that is ID. So now here we have our questions table. So now we will simply copy this and then we'll simply paste here. So now we have our question table also. So now we have questions. Now we will have options for questions. So every question will have 4 options and 1 correct option. So we will create a table, create table question options. Okay. So in short, I will just write question option. Then in this we will have first option ID, integer, primary key, and then auto increment, and then it will be have option number or name, option name A, B, C, D, whatever you want to write. So it will be character 1 A, option A. Then it will be for which question. So it will be a or option description. It will option description. What option description you want to give? It is a text, and then it will be belong to that question. So to which question this option belongs. So we will have our option ID or question ID, sorry, question ID. So it will be question ID because every option, each and every question options belong to one questions. So obviously we have 4 options, so there will be 4 options having same question ID. Okay, so here we have our option, and we have our foreign key, and then in this we have our question ID, and then it will refer to questions table, and in this it will refer to your primary key ID. So now here we will have our options. Okay, ready, copy this and simply paste here, and now we have our question options. So every question will have 4 entries for question options, and in this there will be 1 right option also. So for that we have to create one more table called as correct answer. So create table correct option. So we have a correct option for every question, and that will be again an integer, sorry, ID, integer, primary key, and auto increment. And then we have our question ID, which will be a foreign key for which question, what is the option, correct option. Again it will be an ID. So for this question, amongst these 4 options, this will be the correct option. So for that we have 2 foreign key here now. Foreign key, the first is for question ID, no doubt it will be for this question, references to questions table. Okay, it will be ID, and then the correct option will be again a foreign key. So amongst those 4 options, okay, this option ID from this will be reference to correct question options. Question options, there are 4 question options. Among this ID, that is this correct, is this one, it will be a correct option. So now here we have a correct option. So now let's create this table as well. So now we have created the questions. Now if you see here, the first role, that is the faculty role, for faculty role of task are now over. So now simply show all the tables, show tables. So what this will do, will show all the tables which we have created. Now here we have our user table, roles table, then we have we have subject, chapters, questions, we have all the question options, and we have a correct options. So this is how we are going to create the remaining tables also. So now the next table will be for your admin. Okay, so let's create a table for admin, a panel. So second panel is your admin panel. So what admin panel is going to do? Admin panel is going to create the test. So here create table test. Okay, test detail. Yeah, simply test detail will give the name for the table as test detail. Okay, now here again every test will have a unique id test, so it will be integer, primary key, auto increment, and then we have test name. So you can give a proper name for the test. So let's have varchar of say 255, and then we will have after test name we will have test date, test which date we have exam. Let's have the data type as date. Then test time, so let's have the time. Then we have test duration, so let it be in minutes. Okay, so I have kept its integer, say 120 minutes or 60 minutes, whatever you want to put. Test duration. Then after that total marks, total marks for this test, it will be again in integer. Then marks per question, mark per question, how much is the marks per question? Though it is not required, but let's have this information. Marks per question, again it will be integer. Then we have our total questions. Total questions, how many questions are there? Again it will be integer. And is this test still active or not? So active, whether 0 or 1. So active 0 or 1 means what? If the test is still active, it will be 1, otherwise it will be set as 0 if the test is over. So now here we have some information about the test. We have id, test name, date, time, duration, total marks, marks per question, then total questions and active status. Okay, let's copy this and simply create our table test. So now we have our test created. Now once our test is created, now what we are going to do, we are going to create the pattern for the test, because a test is going to have multiple subjects and it is going to pull the questions from that pattern only. So we have a table called as test pattern. Create table test pattern. Okay, now this table will have the pattern. Now what is the pattern? So it will have first of all integer, id integer, primary key, auto increment. Okay, auto increment, and then let's have the test id here. Test id, because for this test we are going to create the pattern, so let it be integer. And let's have our subject here, because from this subject, okay, subject id, let it be integer again, and topic id, because every subject will have some topics. So let's have our topic id as well. So from this topic I'm going to pull this much questions. Okay, so what does this means that? And after that we will have total questions, total questions. Why total questions? Because if I have created one test, okay, suppose that I have created a test for say NEET exam. So in NEET exam I have 3 papers: physics, chemistry and maths. So here the test will be for NEET, okay, physics, chemistry and biology. Okay, and then we will have subject id biology. Then from say biology has 20 chapters, so it will have 20 different chapters. So here we should have basically chapters. Okay, chapter id, and then from chapter id we will have our topic id. So it will have a pattern, will have a test, it will have a subject, from which chapters, which topics, and what number of questions I have to keep in this test. So here we have all foreign keys only. So we have foreign key. Okay, the first foreign key is your test id. Okay, then it will references to test details. You can normalize more, you can normalize this table furthermore, but right now I'm making it simple, but you can do it in other way also. Test details id, then we have foreign key. Okay, then we have our subject id, then it will refer to references to subjects. Again it will be referring to the primary key of the subject table. Then we have chapter, again foreign key for chapter id. Okay, it will refer to references to say chapters. Okay, and then finally it will have one more foreign key, topic id. Topic id, it will refer to topics. Okay, in that it will refer to your. So now we have following table for test pattern. Okay, so now we'll simply create this table. If there is no error, it will simply create our table properly. Okay, so we have no error here again, so our test pattern is created. Now simply we will have our test questions. Now once the pattern is set, the system will automatically fetch the question according to this pattern. So if you say that I have to pull say 120 questions, and from this subject, from this chapter, from this topic, these questions. So if your pattern is set, your system will automatically pull all the questions. So here create table test questions. Okay, and then we have our again id integer, primary key, auto increment. Okay, then we have our from for test pattern id. Okay, so here we have to simply put the questions. So you can you don't have to give the reference of test pattern id. Basically simply you have to give the test id. For this test id, okay, I have pulled this question id. Okay, because I only need the test id and question id, and everything will be pulled as per this pattern. So which question has to be pulled will depend on pattern, but for which test I have to put this question, it will be a test id. So it is so simple. Foreign key, then we have test id, then we have references, test details, and this we have id. Okay, and then finally we have foreign key, then we have our question id, references to questions, and then inside that we have our id. So now here we have test questions. So simply copy this, okay, and paste here. And now your test questions are also ready. So now your faculty panel task is over now. Now the final task is your student task. Okay, so what the student is going to do, student is going to enroll into the test and simply perform the exam. So there are only two tasks. So create table enroll. Okay, a test enroll, you can say test enroll. Okay, and then we will have id integer, primary key, auto increment, then which user. So user id, because this is a user is nothing but the student. So student is also a user. So we have a user, he is enrolling for this test. So test id again integer. Okay, so you can assign a roll number to this user. Okay, and then after enrollment if scored marks, okay, it will be in integer. Okay, and then finally should I show the result, display result or not, display result or not to the student. So it will be integer, 0 or 1, and you can have any number of columns you want. So basically you have our user id, that is student id, test, for which test he is enrolling, you can assign a roll number to him, roll number, or you can have a unique code also. It can be anything you want. Scored marks, finally after test what marks he has scored. Okay, and then finally if you want to display the result or not, and then we have foreign key. Then here we have our user ID. Okay, references, users, references to your users. In this it refers to primary key, and then finally foreign key. Then we have our test ID. Then we have references to test details. Again it will be ID. Okay, so now here we have our test enroll table ready. Now simply copy this and simply run here, and now here test enroll is over. Now at the finally, after he enrolls for the test, he will give the exam. So giving exam is nothing but to simply for which question what answer he has selected. So here what you're going to do, create a table. Okay, let's have student answer. Okay, student answer, it will not have much columns, it will have very simple columns. So it will have int ID, int primary key, auto increment, and then in this it will have the test enroll ID, test enroll ID. So this is an enrollment ID, and then for which question, question ID. For this question he has opted question option ID, this ID. So here this will simply, for this question he has opted this option, and then we'll have to foreign key. Okay, here we have test enroll ID, which is nothing but your test enroll table refers to test enroll. Okay, in this it will refer to your ID, and finally we have foreign key, and then we have our question option ID. Okay, refers to question options, and then it will have the primary key, and that's it. Copy this and simply paste here, and your entire database is now created. So here again I will show all the tables, show tables, and now we'll see how many tables we have created. One total 13 tables. So in that, users and roles, these are two tables which are associated with your login access and all those things. Roles is 3 roles, admin, users, and so user will be logging using his email ID and password, and depending on role it will get a different login access to different dashboards. Okay, and then finally you will be able to build a proper online examination system depending on the database that we have designed. So this is about your database. And the finally, one more important topic that is remaining is how to create the triggers. So here we have to also learn about the creating the trigger. So what is basically a trigger? For that I'm going to demonstrate a very simple example. Basically trigger, here trigger is just for an exam, just for your general knowledge purpose why we create the trigger. Now most of the times what happens, when we perform some task, for example we will create a trigger on say a table called as your users table. Okay, so let's have this users table. Suppose that if someone changes the value in users table, so the previous unchanged the value which was before change has to be saved in the backup. Okay, so we can achieve that with the help of your users table. And for that what we are going to do, we are going to create one more table called as user backup. So let's create a table called as user backup, and in that user backup table I'm only going to keep following columns. For example, I'm going to keep the name, then email ID, contact, and password. Okay, so let's have this and for that, to save our time, I have already created one table. Since creating table is very much clear to you now, So what we are going to do, we are going to create a table called as user backup table. And now in this user backup table, as you can see, what we are doing, we are going to create a table called as user backup. Again, it will have an primary key. Then we have our user ID, integer, role ID. Again, then name, email, contact, password. Again, we have whether this user is active or not. Okay. Then let's not have this user name column here, and also this operation date also. Let's not keep this. So let's have this much columns here. So here we have our table called as user backup. So this will create a backup for your user table. So let's create this table. Okay, first of all, now after creating this table, okay, we will create a trigger on this on users table. So here, what we are going to do, just simply copy this, okay, and simply paste here. So here we have our table called as a user backup table. Okay, so we don't have anything in this table, but if we check the users table, select star from users. So you'll see we have 3 data in our users table. Suppose I make any changes in any one table here, automatically what should happen, a trigger should be called, and this trigger should insert the old values into my user backup table. So that is a concept. Okay, so for that, what you can do, you can create a trigger. So how to create a trigger? So first of all, I will explain you how to create a trigger. So creating trigger is very simple. Okay, first of all, let me create a raw trigger again for you. So what we are going to do here, we are going to first set a delimiter. Okay, what is delimiter? As you know that in MySQL, whenever you put semicolon, the query is executed. But when we are going to create a trigger, there are a lot of semicolons in between trigger. So whenever it encounters with a semicolon, the query will be executed. And we don't want the query to be executed on semicolon. So this time we are not going to make semicolon as our delimiter, but we are going to change our delimiter. So now we are going to make the delimiter as 2 forward slashes. So you can directly specify delimiter as 2 forward slashes. Then we are going to create a trigger, create trigger. Okay, let's have a trigger called as user backup trigger. Okay. Okay. And then on which table we are going to create a trigger? So create trigger, trigger name before, for which action? Before update. So before update on which table? Users table. Okay. Then we will have our begin statement, and then we will have our end statement, and then we will have 2 delimiters. Why? Because we are ending the query with delimiters. I have assigned this because if I use this semicolon before your trigger is executed, if there is any semicolon inside this, it will execute that and it will give an error. I don't want to execute with semicolon. I want to execute with 2 forward slashes. So I have now set my delimiter to 2 forward slashes. Okay. So this we have to do on the console. So here inside in the begin, what we are going to do, we are going to insert all the old value in our backup table. Okay. So for that, I'm simply going to write this particular query. Let's not waste too much time here. So insert in our user backup. Okay. What all values we are going to put. So let's refine this because what columns which we have taken. So what we have taken, insert into your user backup, ID I have to put, role ID I have to put, name I have to put, email I have to put, contact and password. But this username and this operation date I don't have to put. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to simply remove everything from here. Okay. I don't even want this. Okay. So now here we are inserting old values, that is old.id, old.role ID, old.name, old.email, old.contact, old.password, and old.active status in our table. So in our backup table, what we are going to do, we are going to simply put all these things. So let's create this table, this trigger. So what does old is? Old is old value. Okay, so let's copy this and then paste here. Okay. So here, line number 3, we have some error. So let's check what is the value before update on users. For each row, sorry, I missed one important keyword for, because it can be multiple one update can affect more than one record. So for each row has to be specified. So for each row, okay, let's copy this. First we'll copy our delimiter also. So let's have a delimiter here. Okay, okay, we have set our delimiter. Now we are going to simply create this trigger. Let's copy this trigger, okay, and paste here. So now our trigger is created. Now once our trigger is created, what we are going to do, we are going to if you want to check your trigger, you can simply make use of query show triggers. So it will display all the triggers. So first of all, I will make some changes in user table, and we will see if their backup is saved or not. So what I'm going to do, select star from users. Okay, now sorry, I have to change my delimiters because I have again make the delimiter as 2 forward slashes. So I have to make the delimiter again as my semicolon. Okay, now I will simply select star from users. You can see this select star from user displays all this data. Now I will make an update users set email or set name equal to, let's change the name. So I will change the name of Tushar to say Praveen. Okay, Praveen, and then where ID is equal to say 3. So now my old value was Tushar. Now my new value is Praveen, but this old value has to go to the backup table. So let's do that, and then select star from backup. Select star from user backup, and you'll see that in the backup table my old value is saved. So you can see here the Tushar value, which is the old value, is now saved in my backup table. So what does a trigger do? Trigger, when we create the trigger can be on insert, update, and delete. So what we have done, we have created a trigger on update. So for update, okay, on which table? On users table, but it can be before as well as after. So what is before trigger? What is after trigger? Okay, what is for each row? What is statement level trigger? Okay, this will be done in some another future masterclass session when we will covering more advanced topic of your SQL. But right now, this is all about your database, how to create a proper database, how to create the tables, what are foreign key, primary key, and different types of constraints, then what are different data types in your tables, then how to perform basic queries, then how to create the index, and how to create the triggers. These are all important queries that you have to perform while creating the database that is working on your backend. So that was all from my side. I hope it was clear to you, and if you have any queries, you can definitely ask me or simply post on the comment section. Thank you very much.